Hey, everybody, welcome to the Automation Tech Talk Lunchtime Edition. My name is Sean Tierney. You guys know I try to do this every lunchtime, and I'm just looking to make sure the visuals look right and the audio looks right. We're back in StreamYard here, and I have an awesome special guest with us who agreed to come on today and talk about some really interesting stuff. But before we get to that, I got to think, is there any announcements? There is one. So I'm just about to upload. I won't do it right now, but just about to upload the podcast for today, which is a really interesting podcast on a safety PLC controller. Really cool stuff. I hope you guys will enjoy that this afternoon at around 3:30. I do all. You can see I'm actually in my office. This is where I do a lot of my work, especially in the mornings before I go over to the training room in the afternoons and work on training stuff. And I do have the chat up. StreamYard is telling me they can't. My replies won't be posted to all destinations. But if you're on YouTube, LinkedIn, or over at the Automation blog, please feel free to chat with us and say hi. I am starting a little bit early today, just because I want to spend as much time with our guests as possible. Um, as far as tomorrow, I may do it again here. I may do it from the comfy chairs. I may do it from Studio C. I don't know yet. Depends on what I cover tomorrow. But in any case, we get a bunch of great stuff to talk about, industrial automation stuff, which is why we're here. And now, with that said, I want to bring in my guest. Before I bring him in, though, one of my students and followers who I've met at trade shows actually recommended this post to me. He's like, "Hey, Sean, you should check this out." So I want to say thanks to him, and I got to go to the comments. So bear with me a second. James, how could I forget James? Thank you to James on LinkedIn for recommending I see this post because, as you guys can imagine, I'm running around crazy trying to produce new videos every day and new lessons and work with vendors on all kinds of different projects that I don't get to do a lot of social media browsing, not as much as I'd like. But in any case, thank you, James. And so today, let me bring in our guest, Jake, and let's see here. I'll go right here. And Jake, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, Sean.
Man, I really want to thank you for spending your lunchtime with me and the audience. I know a lot of these folks are going to watch this after the fact, right? But in any case, we're doing this during lunch. And first of all, before we get into the topic we're going to talk about, could you introduce yourself to our audience? Tell them a little bit about yourself, about your company, and what you guys do, and then we'll jump into the reason why we're here.
Sure, sure. No, thanks for having me, Sean. So I'm Jake. I'm principal automation engineer at my company EdgeNot. I've been in industrial automation via the oil and gas industry for the past 13 years, building control panels that are actually flow computers, lots of Allen Bradley PLCs, basically touch this or that all throughout the years. I started Edge not because I wanted to focus more on Linux-based edge computing and virtual PLCs. I see a lot of gaps in that space right now, and I'm trying to fill it essentially.
Yeah, there is, edge, define edge computing for us, because I think a lot of people have different impressions of what that means. What would you call it?
Abs- Absolutely, people do have different impressions. I've learned that mine's a little different than what's common. So I mean, edge computing means edge of network, but you can go out there and you can buy an edge server which is meant to be in an IT room, for example.
Yep.
But I would call like an edge computer is more like a DIN rail mountable industrial PC that goes in a control panel, like maybe on the machine. I mean, I think that's makes the most sense. I mean, if you're using an edge server, it's more towards, I mean, it's a real full-blown server, right?
Yeah, and I think when we're talking about edge devices, I think everybody kind of has their own interpretation. I like yours.
Mm.
It's not in the front office; it's on the edge of the plant, right? And a lot of times we've seen this, I've seen this over the years where, you'll have this box that's not line specific in many cases, that's on the edge of the factory or the plant, that where they do it could be data collection, it could be condition monitoring, but it's kind of like looking at the whole system. And again, Sometimes we have those on really busy lines. We'll have it at like it won't be like one of the local controllers that control parts of the line, but it'll be on the edge, like on one end or the other, typically on the front end, and it's kind of collecting all the data or monitoring the whole system going down the line. And so that makes a lot of sense to me. And I know in a lot of these cases, almost in all of them, you're going to want something industrial, right?
Absolutely. Got to
Yeah.
have the right ratings for sure.
Yeah, well, and that leads us to this post you did, and folks, I will put this link to his post on LinkedIn in the comment in the not in the comments. I can put it in the comments right now, I guess. I'll put it in the I'll put it in the show notes after the show. So just bear with me. I am self-employed, so I have nobody working here. Um, to do this stuff for me in the control room. So in any case, and I just put in the comments and it split the link into two. So I will put it in the show notes after the show. In any case, let's talk about this post that one of my contacts on LinkedIn shared with me. And this it was kind of funny because you just came on with OT, which is a separate company, and we
Mhm.
recorded a podcast which comes out in like 2 weeks. So I definitely want to encourage people to check that out. It's not today's podcast or next week's. It's I think 2 weeks from now, and we talk about virtual PLCs, a very interesting topic. But in any case, tell me a little bit about this article, and I'll see while you're doing that. I'll see if I can pull up the picture and share it.
Sure. So there's a product out there called Raspberry Pi. For those unfamiliar, it's actually the name of a nonprofit foundation. It's originally created for educational purposes. It's used heavily in universities, and uh, since it's so affordable, it's great in the hobbyist community, and it's a very capable, fast hardware. And because it's so common and ubiquitous, um, there are just so many pieces of software out there pre-made specifically for that. So that's it. It kind of builds upon itself. It's already easy to use, but there's just so much out there specifically for the Raspberry Pi. So it's just this great computing platform that can do so much. People host file servers in their home with it, or you can host a VPN. Uh, just about anything you can think of. And there's been a lot of talk about using this in industrial automation. Of course, the problem with that is you have a hobbyist board uh, that doesn't have the proper ratings. So along come these companies, i.e., Revolution Pi. There's many others actually now, um, that have come along and made industrial versions of this, and they use a specialized version of that board made by the Raspberry Pi Foundation called the Compute Module that has industrial temperature grade rated components, EMC requirements met, vibration, all the usual stuff you can think of. Um, I've been wanting to try one out for a while just because I am familiar with the Raspberry Pi and what it can do. Uh, I've been hesitant because a lot of people are kind of naysayers to Raspberry Pi because of the hobbyist version not having the appropriate ratings. So that was kind of the background for this. Is that a mouthful?
Well, and I just want to, for anybody who's not used a Raspberry Pi, right? So think of a single board. They're very small, okay?
Mhm.
So probably the size of a pack of cigarettes or playing cards, and it's basically a computer, okay? And I would call it. So I set one up. I tried to use one as a Plex server. It didn't have the horsepower, so I ended up going with an NVIDIA Shield. But that's a media server, but it really is. Um, it's a one board, maybe $50, maybe $30, depending on the version you get, and it's like a Linux computer with a full blown desktop like you have in Windows. Of course, it's not Windows, it's Linux, but the things you can do with this for hobbyists, just having an all-in-one, like it has ports for HDMI monitors and keyboard and mice, and some of them have Wi-Fi, some of them have Bluetooth, Ethernet built in. Depending on the model you get, you know, you can basically put this on a desk, hook a couple of monitors to it, hook a keyboard and mouse to it, connect it to your internet, and you have a full-blown Linux computer again for between 30 and maybe $60. And I got to say, it's pretty impressive. It's a pretty amazing. And I think we find a lot of people today using the Raspberry Pi for those simple, like for kiosks and other things, where a small Linux computer would be great. Now, again, the off-the-shelf model is office grade. It's designed for office environments. So if you're going to be in an office environment, it would be great for that. Once we get to the plant floor, if any of you guys have put any also office grade computers on the plant floor, sometimes you have a lot of luck with them. Sometimes they just crash and all kinds of problems happen. And so I've seen it both ways. Depending on the more harsh the environment, the less longevity an office grade equipment has on the plant floor. So I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but in any case, and you think Linux, there's so many different things you can run on Linux, right? And you can turn these things into PLCs if you want to, right? And you can turn them into soft PLCs. You can turn them into SCADA systems. Um, you can have Open PLC, CodeSys, OT, and all kinds of devices can run on these things, and as well as SCADA packages. Right, there are actually SCADA packages out there. Two that I think of, and I could be wrong about this, would be Inductive Automation's Ignition, I believe, will run on it, and I believe they have a maker version, and then of course CodeSys has their own virtualization, and I also believe TatSoft, their factory studio, would run on it as well. But don't quote me on those; I didn't research that beforehand. Anything you can add to that before we jump into the industrial side?
Oh no, let's get to it.
Okay, great. So you wanted to test one of these out because you're the edge guy, right? You want to do stuff on the edge in industrial automation. And so let me see if I can figure out how to bring that back up again. So there we can see the unit right there. And so you were able to test it out. Now tell us, all right, so you get the sample. So what did you test out on it?
So when I test out edge devices, I kind of just check out, how the system feels, like how responsive it is, and the user experience to it, how easy it is to set up, how easy it is to connect to it. And then, of course, I'm a big fan of OT's virtual PLC platform, so I had to test it out on that as well. So that involves setting up Docker. Uh, so really, what happens is I get it out of the box, turn it on, connect to it, check out whatever web admin interface they have set up, check all the settings, and get off and go. Start installing or picking it apart.
Now, can you tell us a little bit about Docker? Anybody who doesn't know what Docker is, it is super powerful. And so this device supported Docker.
hmm That's right. It's pretty easy install. Yeah, one of the strengths of uh, well, both Raspberry Pi and this particular product is they provide a flavor of Linux called Debian, which has a massive package repository to it. So it's one line terminal to install Docker. So extremely
Wow,
simple.
nice.
Uh, so Docker is a container engine, and what a container is the I say newer, but it's not really that new. The newer form of virtualization. You know, in the past we have products like VirtualBox, VMware that fully virtualize hardware. You can fully emulate an entire computer, and as you can imagine, that's pretty CPU intensive. You need beefier hardware for that.
Mhm.
Most CPUs have special hardware extensions for that to help things along, make it go faster. But along come containers, and what containers are is it's basically an isolation from the operating system. So, devices, file systems, drives are all abstracted so that the when you have a program running in this container, it sees a different set and not the actual set of devices that are on the actual hardware. So, I mean, in Linux terms, all the Ethernet adapters are named F0, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And so you might have some other, it's like Docker 0 or BR0 in the Docker container, and it's totally anonymous to it, essentially. Uh, and there are a lot of pluses to this. I mean, so first of all, because it's just an abstraction and isolation, most everything runs near native performance, as opposed to hardware virtualization, which can be much, much slower if you don't have the right hardware. And there's essentially, I have to caution myself because it isn't, but it almost has a built-in firewall in the container because you are setting, you know, what ports are open, closed for ingoing, outgoing communications. It's kind of nice in that sense. You can stick your program in here and close up everything that you don't need, even outside of whatever firewall you might have set up for the office or, nearby control panel, etc. Um, and the nice, so, Docker's just one container engine. There's Podman, Container D, Portainer. There's a whole bunch of them. And the nice thing about these is that they all got together to make this OCI specification, which is a standard for containers. So you can download, let's say that you want to run a web server or, some SCADA software, any software package. It's pretty common now that you can download one of these containers, you call it a container image, and then you spin it up on whatever container engine you want to use, because it's that standard specification. So, you can start it on Docker or on Portainer, Podman, whatever it is that you'd like. So it's kind of a universal platform for computing and gives a nice isolation from the file system and the rest of the operating system.
And I think one of the things I like about it that I also like about virtualization is the portability, right? So I was talking, I think it was yesterday, I was talking about my laptop, and I had to get ready to do some in-depth training within a few days. I only had a few days to get ready, so I got a laptop coming in from Best Buy, and I just copied my VMs over. I'm just like, boop, boop. And, they're big, right? And so it took a
Mhm.
while for them to copy over from the file server, but that was that. There was no sitting there for 24 hours feeding disks or feeding, running install routines. And so you think of that with Docker, right? So if I have my application in a Docker container and I now need to move to maybe there's a newer version of this very impressive device here, right? If I want to move to the one, maybe I needed more power, and the new, more power, powerful version came out. Very easy to take. Hey, I'm going to take what's in this stock container, back it up, and put it in the other system, and just go. Assuming all the Ethernet ports line up and that kind of the physical stuff lines up, you just go. It's like you're taking a hard drive out of one computer and putting it in another, but you don't have all the compatibility issues that you would otherwise, right? And we run into that with
Sure.
VMware. I mean, you're gonna virtualization is great, but at some point you needed to point it to the physical ports, right? And so I'm constantly going between wired and Wi-Fi, depending if I'm working at home or at work. So I'm constantly telling VMware which bridge network it should connect to. But that's good because I can switch back and forth. Um, and so in any case, that portability, right? Instead of having to install everything on that Linux box, right? Instead of you're putting it in a Docker container, and now I got this portable container that can go on other devices. And if I did it for one line and I want to do the same thing for 10 more lines, just duplicate that, maybe rename it a little bit so it says line 2 instead of line 1. But I just think that portability is huge. Now, I'm thinking, what do you think are some of the best applications for this? I know you do this for a living, but if we talk about, where could you see, like in the next coming months, where you might deploy some of these? What are some of the common applications you would actually, put this out in the field on?
So I mean, using OT's virtual PLC platform a lot. That's the first thing is basically soft control. Um, Other than that, there's custom applications. You can do AI, machine learning, either training or using an existing model at the edge. Uh, you know, run a data historian, run a database.
Yeah.
There's can pretty much do whatever it is you like because it essentially has the power of a laptop or even a server, depending on the exact hardware that you get. So anything, if you've got a server in the corner of your office and you're running a SQL database on it, or you have Ignition on it, whatever, you could run that similarly on something like the RevPi Connect 4 here.
Yeah, and you could have one in stores too. So if this one failed, not that it
Mhm.
will, just swap them out. It's just a DIN rail mount device. Let's take a look at the physical. I'm sure you had a chance to play with this, right? Um,
Mhm.
Tell us. It looks like it has two Ethernet ports. Is that like a two-port switch, or are those two separate NICs?
I think that it's two separate interfaces,
Oh, that would, if it is,
which
that
is
would be great.
handy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One for the cloud, or one for the front office, and then one for the plant floor. That's what I would do. It looks like it has
Yeah, I
a couple of.
mean,
Go ahead.
sorry, I was going to say, that's another application there is like because it does have separate interfaces and the beauty of Linux having so much built in, such as there's firewall applications called IP tables and UFW. You can set up your routing and essentially create a firewall or set up whatever networking setup that you need. You can isolate the control panel, for example, and have one be the uplink to the outside world.
I'm also seeing a couple of, looks like USB 3.0s. It looks like there
Mm.
is an antenna. Is that for Wi-Fi?
Yep, it's got
Yep.
built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth.
Yep. You probably have to route that to the outside of your panel, um, if you're using a metal enclosure. DIN
Right.
rail mount, which I love. Um,
Mm.
was it 24 volts DC? Is that what powered it?
Yep.
24 volts DC. Anything else about it that I mean, it looks like it's fanless. Is it fanless? Do you remember?
Yep. So it's got a pretty big heat sink inside,
Uh-huh.
which is great. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the things I touched upon in my post is that the mean time between failure, how long it's going to last for you is directly tied for how much those components are exposed to heat.
Yeah.
Even separate from the ambient temperature, if you have a local buildup of heat, it's going to equally destroy that hardware. So there's a heat sink in there that's almost as big as the housing itself, and that's a great thing.
Yeah. To make sure it has a longevity and it can meet those specs. Excuse me.
Absolutely.
That's very interesting. I saw this picture and I saw your post and I was like, this is really interesting because a lot of us won't get a chance to play with things like this. So I'm glad that Revolution Pi folks were able to send you a sample. I'm glad you were able to play with it, try it with the OT virtual PLC, which we have a full show coming up on in 2 weeks, of the automation podcast. And I just want to throw out an invite to Revolution Pi and Phi Tools. If you guys want to come on, we can even have Jake back if he's available and talk some more about this product. It's just, I can definitely see a lot of applications where this would be very much preferred to a very expensive full-blown Windows industrial computer. Um, and Jake, I don't know if I see anything else in the article that's jumping out at me. Was there anything else you thought we should discuss today during our lunchtime chat?
Yeah, I'll throw out there. I said that one of the things that I look for is the user experience, and so this RevPi Connect 4 in particular. You get the device, and on the side of the device it says, the basically the Wi-Fi credentials. Here's the name of the network, and here's the password. So you just plug this in. You put power to it and wait for the hotspot to appear. and it has the IP address and port number on there to bring up the web browser, like the web interface. Uh, so they've made it very straightforward and easy. And very importantly, it's a random password for each device. It's
Nice.
not admin or something ridiculous like that. Um, it's I think it's like pi something, and then it's like hex characters or something. It's just a big random string, and that's important for cybersecurity because that's I feel like that's where a lot of things fall through the cracks is just these default passwords.
Yeah.
Um, and when you bring that up, it's a very polished user interface. I didn't notice any bugs, which is not common. A lot of these edge devices do have very clunky interfaces, and some of the input boxes don't work or they freeze up. And this was just super responsive. They actually use there's a piece of software called Cockpit, which is
Okay.
essentially a web interface for a Linux server. And it allows you to do a lot of common operations like upgrade software. You can
Oh,
even do things with Docker through it. You can start a container, stop a container. So it's just overall very polished interface. And they have, but one last thing is that they have just the right amount of settings, I would say. Some of these devices have 30 different pages of configuration, and it's going to be completely overwhelming for someone new to Linux or new to any of these edge computers for that matter. Uh, and so they essentially just have a few pages. They have a separate server called Pictory to set up the IO modules that you would attach to it. Everything is super clean, super smooth, and that's definitely not common. So kudos to them there.
yeah, I can definitely see because if you're not familiar with Linux, I've only hacked with, I got some web servers and, I've played around with the Pi and I've never, it's especially when you get to my age, it's like, do I really want to learn Linux now? No, I'd rather learn about the latest PLC from all these great vendors we have on the show, and the greatest
Sure.
virtual PLCs from companies like OT, than go down the Linux. Because it just wasn't native to me when I was in school. It was DOS, so that's how far back. Windows didn't exist when I was in school. So, um, yeah, very interesting stuff. So having that ease of use, to be able to do a lot of things in Linux without having to do all the command lines and I gotta say, I've never made sense of the directory structure in Linux, and I'm sure it makes sense to a lot of people, but not to me. But in any case, yeah, no, that's good to hear. So a little lower entry technical barrier to get into it because they've done all that easy use stuff up front, which is really cool. I know I appreciate that, and we cover a lot of products too that have that built in those built-in features that make I was actually covering one a new IO platform from a big vendor, and their IO platform had a awesome built-in web page. I just can't brag about it enough. It just didn't give you stats. It let you like configure the system, see the power requirements, and all kinds of great stuff. So hopefully that episode will come out
Nice.
soon. But in any case, well, with that, let's go ahead and wrap up our lunchtime discussion here with telling people again how to get in touch with you and your company. And I promise, folks, I will put the link in as soon as the show is done. I'll go to all the different locations and add that link. But go ahead and let's, for the outro, Jake, why don't you tell them again about your company, how to find you and get in touch with you. And of course, you guys, you'll hear from Jake again in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Yeah, so EdgeNot is focused on edge computing and virtual PLCs. I am an official partner of OT in the US, a solutions partner. And what we really focus on is kind of bridging that gap. You have these edge computers coming in, and a lot of automation engineers might be experts with Siemens or their Rockwell PLCs, but not really know much about Linux,
Mhm.
and not having any experience on the command line. So looking to bridge that gap for people, either training, consulting, or device setup. There are unfortunately right now some steps. There are gaps to be able to set up a Linux device to properly run a real-time application. They have there's a Linux patch. It's actually now part of the kernel called preempt underscore RT, which allows programs to it allows the operating system to preempt kernel tasks so that real-time applications can run smoother. But that's not all you need. You need much more than that. And I think in the upcoming years, things like that are going to be made a lot smoother by device manufacturers. It's going to be check boxes on those web interfaces. But for now, looking to help people with that.
We do
And
have a go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just going to say how to reach me. It's you can search for EdgeNot on LinkedIn, or the website is edgenot.io.
Do you have access to the chat? Because somebody just asked if they could contact you on LinkedIn, and I'm sure the answer is yes. Um, could you throw in your LinkedIn link into the chat right now? Do you have access to that?
Sure, let me get that real quick.
Okay, great. And while he's doing that, unfortunately, StreamYard does not show me the LinkedIn. Even Discord sometimes does not Discord. Restream doesn't show me the LinkedIn usernames. So I apologize to the users out there who you're showing up as anonymous. Ooh. But in any case, while Jacob throws his LinkedIn into the chat, I just want to thank you all for tuning in again. I do have shows planned for tomorrow at lunch and Friday at lunch. And then next week, as I was saying, I think I said this yesterday, I hope to finish off on Saturday building all those demos so I can come in and do some more hands-on stuff with you, kind of like live versions of the automation show. So, oh, and I don't want to forget, we have an awesome podcast on a safety PLC controller coming out at 3:30 today. Of course, you don't have to watch it live; you can go watch it anytime. But I did want to make sure you guys knew about that. And we also have, training. If you want to buy a block of time for your people, you can save up to 20% by buying a block of my time to do training. Typically, you would send your people here. I will go to your facility, but I'm not going to bring my hardware because I'm just too old to carry a bunch of PLCs around with me. But in any case, just let me know if you're interested. And of course, I have online training. You guys know that I've been doing that for over a dozen years. And Grok, AI Grok. So I checked and they actually ranked me in the top 3 online training courses, and I'm like, "You got it wrong. I'm number 1, Grok. I'm number 1. What's wrong with you, Grok?" But I'm just joking around here. But in any case, were you able to throw that into the comments?
Yeah, I saw the person who wanted to
Okay.
connect, and I sent them a connection request, and I'm gonna just throw in a comment here just to stick my head out as well.
All right, Ken. Well, Jake, thank you for actually you made my job easy. I didn't really have to do anything today because you did all the talking. So thank you for coming on, and I hope the audience enjoys these. We do these every now and again, and I enjoy them. But thank you very much, Jake, and have a great rest of your day.
Oh, my pleasure. No, thanks for having me. I love talking edge computers, industrial PCs, all that. So happy to talk again about them if you want.
Okay, great. Yeah, if something new comes out like this, yeah, definitely get in touch. And I just want to wish all you out in the audience, I want to wish you all good health and happiness. And until next time, my friends, peace.